allow me to move to our last session, closing session for the 5-day Pilipinas conference. We've had nearly 1,000 participants through the different 5 days, topics and sessions. For this virtual dialogue on shared prosperity for recovery and sustained long-term economic growth, we have as our main speaker, Mr. Jaime Augusto Sobel de Ayala, Chairman and CEO of Ayala Corporation, one of the most diversified business group in the Philippines and a leading business thought leader in our country. And we have asked a member of the Philippine Trade Foundation, Mike Toledo, to help moderate this session. So I will pass it on to them, and we will listen and learn from this virtual dialogue. Thank you. Mike? Jaime?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dindo. And again, congratulations to you and the men and women of Stratbase for coming up with this Pilipinas conference, much needed, especially now. So again, my congratulations and also happy birthday to Beth. Again, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the last dialogue of session 5, the key role of the business sector in economic recovery. We are indeed very much privileged to have with us today to share his views on shared prosperity for recovery and sustained economic growth, the chairman and CEO of one of the oldest and most admired conglomerates in the region, Jaime Augusto Sobel de Ayala. Welcome, Jaime, and thank you for joining us today, albeit virtually.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Mike. I put a tie on today just because I know you are going to be wearing a tie, Mike.
I had a feeling that I need to wear a tie, so I'm glad you did. I mean, and you're looking very well. Although today we're doing it virtually, but if you do recall, the last time I hosted something like this with Ricky Razon and Joey Concepcion also in that panel, it was about 3 years ago, and it was quite engaging. But I have to admit, even if today is virtual, I am quite certain it will be still as engaging and provocative as well. So again, Jaime, on behalf of Stratbase, thank you so much. I know how busy you are. I'm quite aware of all the things that you've been doing. So thank you very much.
No, thank you too, Mike, and thank you also to Dindo Manhit for the invitation.
Now, we all know that the situation nowadays. I need not revisit, rather, how bad COVID has affected, has ravaged, the havoc that it has created as far as the economy and, more importantly, lives are concerned. However, your group, led by you, for example, did a lot of things which normally perhaps others did not expect. For example, you waive rent payments from tenants. The financial institutions that you led delayed interest payments on loans. Public utility companies as well exercise, or rather move deadlines, gave grace periods. And same thing with, if I may, with the MVP group, they also did the same in terms of the public utilities. San Miguel also did the same vis-a-vis treating their employees as well. And some companies or manufacturers even recasted or changed their manufacturing to produce more PPEs and others. So this kind of activity, which in a way was the private sector, not competing with each other, but acting in unison to help soften the impact of the lockdowns. Would you consider this as something new? How did this happen?
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Mike, and a pleasure to be here. Let me also congratulate Dindo Manhit and Stratbase for convening this gathering. I've had a chance to come in and out of the different discussions, and this is a time for all of us to continue learning from each other, seeing how we're moving and be able to act in unison. But Mike, to get to your point, and frankly, I was listening to Risa Mantaring just before us, and she was really quite exceptional. Her thinking and mine is completely aligned. In fact, I thought with Risa's talk, Dindo could have actually just closed this session. But on that issue, Mike, a very interesting thing has happened. I mean, there are issues that we're facing now that are not only global in nature, but national in nature, where it demands collective action. None of us can fix this problem. It is an unprecedented situation, a pandemic that has not only hit us across the nation, but across the world, has basically ground the economy and the capitalist system that we rely on to a halt. And you've mentioned the kind of engagement the private sector groups, not just ourselves, but others have had. And I think Risa said it beautifully earlier. This is an ecosystem we're part of, Mike. You know, we survive and we prosper and we add value because of the interlinks that we now have as part of our economic system. You have corporations that have supply chains. We have larger companies, smaller companies interlinked. The whole beauty of the capitalist system is the way it links up for greater efficiencies. And with that, you get innovation, you get lower prices. It's a very interlinked system. And when you have a pandemic of this nature, Mike, the whole system bogs down. And I think one has to understand that for the whole system to jumpstart again, all of us have to be in this together. We cannot succeed if the rest cannot succeed as well. And I think that instinct, which is a very strong one in the private sector, is one that kicked in very early on, and everybody rose together to say, you know what, this is a time for collaboration. It's a time for the private sector to work with the public sector. It's a time for all of us, in a way, to hold hands and come out of this together. See what we can all do to contribute, coordinate, cooperate, and see if we can jumpstart this economy. And I think as private sector groups, Mike, these are instincts that we all have. We understand how things can get going again. We understand working with others. We understand collaboration. And at a time like this, when the issues are overarching and affect us all, I think we all have a responsibility to act as much as we can in unison. And I think that started to happen naturally.
Thank you very much, Jaime. In fact, you're very right. And we're so glad to have partnered with you and a lot of this collaboration with both our conglomerates. You have, of course, PDRF, you have Ugnayan, and many, many others. And definitely the partnership and collaboration between us and, of course, with the other members of the Philippine Business Society is very crucial at this point. So you're telling me, in effect, then, that there is now a huge transformation as far as Philippine business culture is concerned.
I think you can maybe narrow it down to three issues, Mike. I mean, obviously there is, you know, when this pandemic hit, there's no playbook. Everybody's just started to self-reflect and say, you know, how do we ride out of this? But if I were to look at the three things that filtered down, is first and foremost the one we were discussing, collaboration. It's been an unprecedented move towards working hand in hand, both private and private and private and public, in a unified way to create solutions and address the pain points that we have. The other thing, and Risa was very eloquent in discussing it just before this, is this new stakeholder centricity. This issue that we have to take care of the ecosystem around us if we need that ecosystem to succeed. This recognition that the role of the corporation goes beyond a fair return to the people who put capital to work, but that we have a responsibility to our employees, to the ecosystem around us, to the environment around us, to the community around us, is a whole new philosophy that's very much in keeping with the way we look at things. And finally, so essentially you had the issue of collaboration, you had the issue of stakeholder centricity, and finally, the big new issue, which I think is absolutely correct, is the whole issue of sustainability, Mike. Sustainability beyond just climate-related issues or environmental-related issues. Sustainability with respect to inclusivity and the kind of engagement we would like our institution to have that makes it relevant for the future. And that touches on many points that are these days encompassed by ESG and many other areas. So if you take those three issues, collaboration, a broader view of stakeholder centricity and sustainability, these are new elements that I think are making institutions far more relevant to addressing the pain points in our society. And I think the role of the private sector as a whole in addressing these pain points, giving employment, creating products and services, but at the same time being citizens who contribute to the development agenda of a country, I think is a very powerful idea, Mike. And I think the pandemic, negative as it is, has maybe brought that up to light and reinvented in a way the role that all of us have in the private sector as major drivers, I guess, of a progressive agenda that moves the country forward.
Indeed, as they say, the most powerful force in the world is an idea whose time has come. And no doubt it can never be business as usual anymore. And these things must be adapted as they should have been adapted perhaps way in the past.
Yeah.
Moving forward, Jaime, um, we all know, even prior to this pandemic, there has been a lot of growth as far as the digital economy is concerned. Digital transformation is a very important part of a nation's development. But we have to admit, because of this pandemic, it has hastened the importance, is that it has hastened the development. And we all know that we must, at this point, unimpeded, fast track our digital transformation efforts. Could you please kindly share with us what your group has been doing to ensure all the
Yeah.
needs as far as this aspect is concerned are met?
Well, from that point of view, maybe let's just start, Mike, with something that your group and ours are involved in, which is really, and others, in laying out the digital infrastructure of this country. We've been at it for some time now. Technology has shifted and changed.
Yes.
And there are major contributions that have been made to laying out the infrastructure. Obviously, for both of us, a lot of more work needs to be done. But I think your group and ours, we're spending close to $1 billion a year on a regular basis, year after year, rebuilding the infrastructure and adding to it as much as needed. From our point of view, we started this journey some years back already, Mike. We realized that there were a tremendous number of products and services that were going to have to ride, obviously, on a digital infrastructure. And we started the process, some more advanced than others across our group companies, in beginning to digitize our work. Obviously, our telecommunication infrastructure was probably the most advanced in thinking on that front, but many others that were traditionally bricks and mortars type institutions with a different way of interacting with the customers also began to evolve. When the pandemic hit, there was absolutely no choice. Customers, if you're focused on them, were beginning to look at keeping themselves safe and accessing products and services in completely different ways. And so that transformation just moved up to a whole different degree. I mean, for example, we were just having a discussion at our board of our real estate company, Ayala Land, yesterday, Mike, and it was unheard of that we would ever close a sale without the customer actually visiting a lot and then actually signing physical papers. We are now able to close a transaction on a piece of property, looking at it visually, exchanging notes virtually, and then signing documents electronically. This whole cycle can be done without anyone having to physically visit a site. And that's been an extraordinary transformation in what has traditionally been a very bricks and mortar oriented company. And that's not even going into the way the construction group in that company is now digitized, the way their services are. And that's a very traditional company. In our Bank of the Philippine Islands, we had a massive legacy system from the past. Over the last 3 to 4 years, we've been transforming it at some great pain because taking a legacy system, particularly a complex one in a traditional financial institution, is not easy. And they've managed to also digitize using APIs and the like, all their services now and have built up a position of leadership, I guess, on the mobile banking space. The list goes on and on. Mike, I think we do have the technology now. We do have the infrastructure. Some of the more challenging ones, which I think both of us are trying to contribute to, is the educational space. Mike, it's a tough thing. Students can't go back to school, and I think we all have a responsibility to do whatever we can to help contribute to alleviating that pain point. But the challenges are great, and we're all in this together to try to find solutions to these new barriers we have brought about by health epidemic.
Thank you, Jaime. I guess we can categorically say to government that both our groups are really doing our best to ensure that the needs required for a robust digital economy are in place. And I would like to take this opportunity, perhaps also, Jaime, to thank government, led, of course, by President Duterte, who has made sure that red tape will be cut to ensure that we're able to put up all the necessary infrastructures, especially the towers, which have been a bane for quite a long time. The other item, Jaime, is we all know that consumption and remittances were essentially the traditional growth drivers as far as the Philippine economy is concerned. But sadly and unfortunately, because of this pandemic, which has wreaked havoc on the economy, this has definitely gone down. So what do you think that our view is that most businessmen's view for that matter are that FDIs should be a way to go, to move forward, to help the economy. But do you think that the present ecosystem, the regulatory and legal structure as it is it attractive enough for foreign direct investments to come in?
Well, you bring up an interesting point, Mike, because if you look at the major drivers of our economy, it's really been a consumption-led economy. And you're correct. A lot of that is driven as well by the inflow of revenues by overseas service workers who provide services of one kind or another in a global setting, allow that foreign exchange to return, and that then drives consumption on so many fronts. I think it's been a strength of the country. Let's go back to its pluses. Many countries around the world were desperate to get the kind of consumption figures the Philippines had. But now we face a reality, which is consumption has slowed down, and remittances, of course, have slowed down, but also consumption locally has slowed down because people have not been able to move around for health-related reasons. So we have to reinvent, like we're doing as corporations, we have to reinvent our place in the world and what will make our economy tick. And I would agree with you, Mike. I think the whole investment-led component of the economic equation of our country has to be jump-started. And by the way, the private sector have a role and the public sector have a role. So all of us have to use whatever balance sheets we have, matched up, of course, with the changing nature of demand, which we hope, of course, will increase again, to start reallocating resources and rebuilding, giving jobs, and getting that cycle moving again. The public sector as well have their own balance sheet. They have their own spending. And we would hope that they would also be catalysts to jumpstart spending at a time like this and getting infrastructure moving as they seem to be, to also help. So this is a symbiotic relationship where all of us, it's more than just FDI, Mike, which of course is important, and hopefully we can create the kind of structure that will be, I guess, internationally accepted as an attractive framework for people to come in and invest in our country, and we should all be encouraging of that. But at the same time, local capital formation, what private sector companies begin to put forward in terms of capital, and in what the public sector as well start to reallocate to jumpstart the economy, both are important as well. So I think to jumpstart this economy, we all have to move to an investment-led push. And of course, it's hopefully turns into a virtuous cycle as more jobs get created, there's more spending power. Then you start to get this cycle of people beginning, an economy beginning to reawaken. But all of this, the major overhanging issue, Mike, is the health situation. People, in order to feel good again about the future, and investment is all about feeling good about the future, it's a psychological state, have to feel good about themselves and their own position. So the healthcare infrastructure of the country, the testing that we all work jointly in, and a massive amount of collaboration between the private and public sector on that front, now moving to the vaccine field, where we were just at a meeting yesterday of a T3 consortium. There were about 300 people there, private and public, working with Secretary Galvez, Secretary Vince, and a number of DOH officials to start saying, how can we all contribute to a vaccination program that will be helpful? All of these things that address health-related issues will go a long way from an ancillary point of view in creating the kind of atmosphere that will lead, I think, Mike, to the kind of progressive economic restart that would be useful to all of us.
I'm so glad, Jaime, that you raised the vaccine issue, because that's definitely the elephant in the room. At the end of the day, I think everyone listening to us or joining us today would really like to know the status of those vaccines and how those vaccines are going to be coming in the near future, and what the private sector is doing to ensure that they help government bring in those vaccines and distribute it to our people. But I guess that question has already been answered. And I believe because of that statement, our stock market will do better tomorrow morning or this afternoon. Good news is always good and welcome. Earlier on, Ed Chua, I think, quoted Thomas Friedman when he said that Thomas Friedman's bottom line was the shareholders. But it seems now that is not the case. I mean, it used to be profit versus people versus planet, but it doesn't have to be. They're not mutually exclusive. They can collaborate. They can cooperate. Could you further expound on this?
Yeah, sure, of course. And I think the way Ed was putting it, if I recall his statements, is he was using Ed Friedman as a dictum, a capitalist dictum from the 1970s, and a driver of of value creation with a focus on stakeholder return or shareholder returns. I think what Ed made, the point he made, and what Risa also made earlier, was that this has broadened. And I think the private sector, frankly, Mike, is a massive engine for progress in a country, but it can only be a progressive force if it is also aligned to addressing the development needs of a country. And we've seen that the capitalist system is an extraordinary system for bringing masses of people out of poverty and creating innovation and creating investment, creating jobs, and creating a progressive path forward. But it's also created big swaths of inequality. So I think it is our responsibility, not only as governments, but as private sector entities, to address those issues as part and parcel of the way we work as well. And I think the point Ed was making was this evolution of our role as institutions who have responsibility over capital and how that capital gets used has broadened to say, that all of us have a role to balance out the pain points created by a capitalist system that's created some imbalance, I guess, in the world, has created more inequality, and that all of us have a role to try to balance that equation out while still focused on getting a good return to investors and the capital that gets, from a fiduciary point of view, put in our hands. It's a trickier issue, but if we can get the equation right, Mike, then I think we start to create a virtuous cycle where a progressive private sector can be a massive engine, probably the most important engine for growth in a country.
Thank you very much, Jaime. Indeed, that should be the mindset for the future. We can no longer allow things as they are to happen. We all know that while a lot of people have really financially improved through all these years, the great income divide has also, the chasm of the great income divide has really widened. And it is good to know that leaders like you are looking at it in a different way and ensuring that this chasm is, the wide chasm somehow is narrowed down. I think we're running out of time, and what can I say? I mean, it's never enough with you, Jaime. I mean, you have so many very good ideas and to share with us, and we really thank you for this. And I guess StratBase will be very happy to note that this session, I think, is one of the, if I may say, was one of the best sessions for the whole week affair. So maybe, would you want to say something first?
Maybe just some last thoughts, Mike. Thank you for your kindness and for your engagement. I think we think alike on so many different fronts, and to be able to be talking with a friend is always a pleasure. Maybe just a couple of last thoughts. I welcome dialogues like this, and I've been a little bit more engaged than normal because, out of a bad situation, Mike, sometimes there is a chance for reinvention. And the beautiful part about a progressive private sector is one that can self-reflect, can keep adjusting to the changing circumstances we're in, and maybe come out of it better than it was before. You brought up a number of issues that are so important, Mike. A change in the economic model. We've tended to rely on a consumption-driven economy. Maybe now it's time for all of us, government and private sector, to say, let's all jumpstart this economy together. All of us in the private sector, we have to address pain points in society. We have to broaden our responsibility. And then finally, Mike, we have a very important role in the private sector, which is to continue giving jobs, creating jobs, and reskilling. I think, again, Risa, in her wisdom, mentioned the whole thought of reskilling, re-educating. The world is changing, economies are changing, but all of us can change with it. You have a much more digitized environment, but we can continue laying out the infrastructure needed and keep shifting and changing. We have a young population. They're quick to adjust to these changing circumstances. And all of us as institutions should not fall in love with, I guess, the structures of the past. All of us should use the crisis to reinvent ourselves. And in some ways, that's fun. It's a chance to reinvent ourselves, see how we can be relevant, and see how we, the private and public sector, can collaborate, work together, and bring our country out of a very difficult situation. And you know what? That's an exciting thing, Mike. Thank you.
Exactly. One final note. I would like to end on a light note, Jaime. You're looking well. You're looking very fit and relaxed despite all the stress that you're facing, for sure. So maybe a lot of our fellow executives, businessmen, and friends would like to know, how do you do it?
Yeah. Well, I think all of us, Mike, and it's probably not too different to you. I know you a little bit, but a regular. I think regular exercise. In my case, it's extremely early in the morning. is quite rigorous and without stop. I think a physical exercise at a time when you're having to sit down in front of a screen on a regular basis is important, both for mental and physical health. Take breaks. Lunch for me is, which is coming up now, is relatively sacred. Usually, Lizzie, my wife, and I, we sit down, we chat, we don't talk business, we catch up on other things. Sometimes family joins, carving out some mental space. And then at the end of the day, well, a little cigar, maybe a cocktail, always helps ease off the burdens of the day, Mike.
Of course, cigar and cocktails is always good and welcome. But one thing, if I may say, I've never had so much alcohol on my hands rather than in my stomach.
Well, it's a tense time. It's a tense time, Mike, and all of us have to take the edge off the day in some form or fashion, as long as it's not abused.
Exactly. And on that note, again, Jaime, maraming salamat. Thank you so much for your time and for the enlightened words and wisdom that you've shared with us this morning. Again,
Mike,
Jaime, thank you very much.
Always a pleasure, Mike, and thank you very much. And a big congrats as well to Dindo Manhit, to his team, and to Stratbase for really piecing together a great conference. I've come in and out. Topics are massively relevant, and just delighted to be a part of it. Thank you. Thank you to all.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to turn this over to Paco or to Dindo. Thank you very much.